I'm in Chelmsford, England. Chelmsford is a city in Essex. It's about 30 minutes by train from London Liverpool Street, and it's notorious for being a major hub for hanging poor women who were tainted as witches and blamed for causing evil deeds in society. In 1565, Elizabeth Lawes from Great Waltham was the first person in England to be hanged from witchcraft. The Discovery of Witches by Matthew Hopkins. Between 1644 and 1647, Matthew Hopkins became a self-appointed witch-finder general, torturing and sending more women to their deaths than all other witch hunters in the previous 160 years. Perhaps they chanted something like in India we chant mantras, they call it spells here. And even in India, women who are blamed as witches in villages are killed brutally, and they are just hunted down and killed in certain villages because they blame them for cursing others and causing misfortune to other people. This is a kind of an apartheid against women and also against those who are from backgrounds that are absolutely like poverty related, and they were just ganged up against and abused. This is also a kind of a religious discrimination. Churches were established and the religion took over to destroy all beliefs in paganism and in any ancient beliefs or faiths in anything supernatural other than their God. And they started embarking on these inquisitions and witch hunts to kill anybody who was a non-believer or who had any unusual traits about them. It could be wearing heels or lipsticks, or they were accused of causing famines. Nothing was probably their fault, and these were their artifacts kept in the Museum of Chelmsford today. These are sad reminders of what victims have been through, women have been through, and animals are still going through today. Also at times those women might be completely, like, if we call it innocent, because they didn't even do any spells or anything, but even if they did, how can you blame someone for causing plagues or causing famines or causing deaths of your family members by just their mind? And even if that was possible, you can't just kill them publicly and execute them. So I hope that this message teaches us how brutal society has been, not just to animals, but to women, to victims, to poor people, and to those who have done no harm, and how much abuse, discrimination has been so recent in society. It's just like being in the Matrix. There is a telephone booth behind me. Reminds me of how Trinity and Neo used to escape.
If you do not confess your sins and admit what you are.
My mother and I are winning. Nothing more. Why did you torture us so?
This is not torture. These are endurance tests.
Matrix is everywhere. When you go to church, when you pay your taxes, it's all around us all the time.
Yes, yes is what I want to hear. Yes, I am sorry for cavorting with Satan and murdering Prudent Heart's baby.
Be strong. They will kill us. We must tell them what they want to hear. No, that's not true. Be evil and insane and stay strong. Don't do it. I want to stop. I'll give you the name.
This is it. The kingdom of heaven may yet have mercy on your soul.
No, you wretched girl.
Sense, fight between God and the devil raging within you. Tell me, child, are there others? There are always. Their names, child. You will surely be condemned for witchcraft. What you do today may save your soul. Manx!
And when?
Yeah, we live near a station, so we
My
go
mum.
to the station.
No.
It's the centre. Okay, this is the centre, French Street.
I am the ghost of Matthew Hopkins. I imagine you all think of witches as having pointed hats flying across the sky on broomsticks. Childish imaginings. I'm going to tell you today about unimaginable things that happened and went on in this country, in this county by ours. It seems I'm famous. Books have been written about witchcraft that mention me, including the witchcraft papers. Also, the one about the witches flying on broomsticks. Yeah? Please look at these images. You will see what I mean. By Peter Henning, an author and expert on witchcraft and the occult. She says that Essex, the county in which we live, is the centre of a terrible witchcraft hysteria which blighted the English countryside from the middle of the 1560s to the close of the 17th century. It's hard to believe, walking through Chelmsford High Street today, that in a place of what people call a terrible persecution of hundreds of women. The Witchcraft Act, 1542, was Elizabeth's first witchcraft law, which came to force during the King Henry's 8th reign. It made witchcraft a crime that would be punishable by death. Being considered to be a witch was enough to get you executed. This law only lasted until 1547, when Henry VIII died. It was replaced in Elizabeth's first reign, which began in 1558. In 1562, a new Witchcraft Act was passed against conjurations, enchantments, and witchcrafts, which stated that the death sentence was only to be used for those who had caused harm to an individual. Lesser offences of witchcraft would be punishable by prison. One of the first cases which caused a sensation at the time was the trial of Agnes Waterhouse. In 1566. It has a witchcraft suspect that her name appears on a list of accused felons in the Essex Record Office. A felony was a serious crime, punishable by death. And the group of suspended felons included Agnes. It all began in the village 6 miles north of Chelmsford, called Hatfield Pebble, and the village became famous for the so-called witches who lived there. It might be impossible to believe when you visit that village today and see people going about their daily business that anyone living could have been charged with witchcraft. But in 1566, 3 Hatfield Pebble women were accused of witchcraft and put on trial. They were Agnes, her daughter Joan, and Agnes' sister Elizabeth Francis. We know a lot about the trial because of the existence of a sensational pamphlet produced afterwards called The Examination and Confessions of Certain Witches at Chelmsford in the county of Essex. It describes how a white spotted cat called Satan acted as a familiar for all 3 women at certain times, enabling them to carry out witchcraft against others. Familiars, or imps, usually were small household pets. Imps? You've got witchcraft named imps? Yeah, got that.
Imps.
Companions, according to legend, familiars are sort of guides who take the form of an animal on earth. They were loyal guardians and protectors of witches and were sent to kill them with their magic. At the trial, young Joan was acquitted, her sister Elizabeth spent a year in prison, but the judges found Agnes guilty of crimes against witchcraft. And she was sentenced to death and executed on July the 29th, 1566, at the Gallows in what would become Waterhouse Lane. If you live in Chelmsford, you may know the road at Waterhouse Lane. It's named after Agnes. During the Elizabethan era, life in Essex was hard, and people lived in fear of the plague, famine, and war. Medicine was almost unknown to most people, and people believed in the devil to explain everyday problems. There was a lot of superstition and ignorance. You can see examples of how people attempted to protect themselves from evil spirit in the museum today. There's a Venomine jar, which would have been filled with things like nail clippings, hair, and even urine to ward off spirits and curses. And a shoe found in a chimney, all to ward off spirits. During the 16th century, many people believed that witchcraft explained their sudden and unexpected bad luck. such as the death of a child, a bad harvest, or the death of cattle, and witch hunting became an obsession in some parts of the country. Witch hunt became an increasingly popular method of banishing evil, or so they thought. Interestingly, the witch hunt, you may know the word, came about during these times. And a witch hunt was an attempt to find and punish a person or a particular group of people who were being blamed for something, often simply because of their opinions and not because they had actually done anything. James VI of Scotland was Elizabeth's first cousin, and he became King of Scotland in 1567. On the death of Elizabeth in 1603, as Elizabeth had no heirs, he became King of England. And because of this, he is known as James VI of Scotland and James I of England. King James took a keen interest in demons and witches, and he even published a book called Demonology, published in 1597, in which he describes the fearful aboundings of this time in this country, these detestable slaves of the devil, witches or enchanters. Roughly translated, that means he was worried about the huge number of witches or enchanters who existed at that time, describing them as detestable slaves of the devil. Shakespeare was keen to win favour with the king. It might explain the inclusion of witches in the play Macbeth. Maybe some of you know the quote, double, double, toil and trouble, fire, burn and cauldron bubble. A further witchcraft act was passed in 1604, during James I's reign, which broadened the earlier act, reinstating the penalty of death to anyone accused of witchcraft. The act's full title was an act against conjurations, witchcraft, and dealing with evil and wicked spirits. People who exposed witches could make a lot of money, as local magistrates paid the witch finders, as they were called, the equivalent of a month's wages. And the busiest man of all was Matthew Hopkins, me. I call myself the Witch Finder General, as responsible for about 300 women being executed in East Anglia during the English Civil War in 1645 and 1646. And by the way, I made a lot of money at it. I was first mentioned and became known as the infamous Witch Finder General in 1644 in the town of Manningtree, in Essex. Although nobody gave me any authority, with a civil war going on, who's going to miss another few bodies? I arrived in the town to buy a local inn with money I had inherited from my father. He was a preacher by the name of John Hopkins. It was in Manningtree that I met John Stern, another enthusiastic witchfinder, who worked closely with me throughout my 14th month of what people call a reign of terror across East Anglia and beyond. A career as a witchfinder lasted until my retirement in 1647. And during this time, I and my associates were responsible for more people being hanged for witchcraft in the previous 100 years. And we were solely responsible for the increase in witch trials during those years. I am believed to have been responsible for the execution of over 100 alleged witches between the years of 1644 and 1646. Myself and my colleague John Stern sent more accused people to the gallows than any other witch hunter in England for the previous 160 years. And I was proud of it. Although torture was unlawful in England, I often used techniques such as depriving women of their sleep to extract confessions from my victims. I used to cut the arm of the accused with a blunt knife. If she didn't bleed, she was said to be a witch. Me and my associates also looked for the devil's mark. The devil was said to create a mark that all witches or sorcerers were thought to possess. It was said to be dead without feeling and would not bleed. If a suspect witch had no visible marks, invisible ones could be discovered by pricking. Therefore, I employed pricking, witch prickers who pricked the accused with knives or special needles looking for such marks. Normally after the suspect had been shaved of all body hair. It was believed that a witch's familiar would drink the witch's blood from the mark. Proof of being a witch would also be a third nipple, an unusual scar, or a birthmark, a boil, a growth, or even just only a cat, or any other pet, a witch's familiar or evil spirit. Another of my methods was the swimming test. Based on the idea that witches had renounced their baptism, the water would reject them. Suspects were tied to a chair and thrown into water. All those who swam, floated, were considered to be witches, and those who sank to the bottom were innocent. Hundreds of women, some people thought wrongly, were accused and punished. Well after my death in 1735, during the reign of George III, another Witchcraft Act was passed by Parliament. In 1735, Witchcraft Act, which repealed all acts I mentioned so far. The Act decided that witchcraft was no longer to be considered a criminal act. It became illegal for someone to accuse another of manipulating black magic. It became a crime for a person to claim that any other person had magical powers or was guilty of practicing witchcraft. With this, the law abolishing the hunting and execution of witches at this time in our country's history came to an end. This didn't matter to me because I died in mystery in 1647. Doctors thought I had tuberculosis. I'm buried in the churchyard. Thank you.